Hi, I'm Paul from Test Data Services, and this is the video walkthrough of the test artifacts. The previous video was the test plan, a video walkthrough of a test plan, and this is the test artifacts. So in this test artifact summary, I would normally go through the test scenario and any scripts and any other things that I need to discuss to give context to anyone looking at this test after the fact or before the next round of testing or whatever. So this is a scenario. It's a 1,000 user scenario for LoadRunner 12.63. The 100 and the 10 user is really the same with just less users. I'll show you the scripts first. So the script I've got open is the sign up script. So in the test plan I explained I'm doing two things. I'm simulating the business process of someone signing up with an OpenID Connect provider, like sign up with Google to a website or an app, or sign up with Facebook. So that's this business process. The other business process is when you authenticate after you've signed up and then do lots of refreshes over time to get new credentials. So this script here, it's a DevWeb. You may not have seen this before, so I'll walk through it. We have an ability to store default headers and to also say that by default we don't want to see the body of the response. That just apparently, according to the documentation, increases efficiency if you say that. If you need it for debug, obviously turn it on. Up here I've also specified a client ID as per the test plan. The authorization header for the authorization call, the back channel call, and also a subscription ID that I'm using. So the first request, before the first request, we do a transaction. So we say new, load, all of the LoadRunner DevWeb calls start with load, transaction, and we name the transaction. You'll see that in the report. In the next video, I do the report. So we start the transaction here. When we're done, we finish it. In the actual request, we specify a URL, which is to get unique random person, which in this case fetches one of the 2.5 million identities that hasn't been fetched yet for this subscription ID. We pass the subscription ID in. We get back from that in JSON format via an extractor, is the language they use for DevWeb, a UID, an email address, and a physical address ID, which I was using for something else, but I forgot to take it out. Then I actually log, so I'll show you in the log what that UID is. Then the next transaction is we push an identity. So I'll put a card up to show you the OpenID Connect call, so I don't have to explain it here, but we basically push an identity so that we can then do an authorize, and it'll authorize an identity. We need to specify what identity is going to get authorized. So when we do that, we get back a UID for the identity that was just pushed, and we also get back an indicator saying how many are in the queue that haven't been authorized yet. And if that number was not more than one, then, or not one or more, then we want to make sure that we actually push it a second time. The reason is that when we stop and start tests, we might actually get to a situation where we try and use things we haven't, or pop things we haven't pushed yet, based on the way that it can work. So just as a defensive mechanism, so when we start up a test, we never have that happen. I might do the odd extra call, and it's pretty rare, but it's just in there for defensively, so I don't get any errors. I don't like errors in my results. So that does an extra push. But what we're expecting to do next is an authorize. So the authorize does a call to authorize. It's a get, and we pass in 3 query parameters, and we expect to get back an access token and a refresh token. Then on the next call, we do a token exchange, which is all OpenID Connect stuff. Go back to the other video to look at that. And we pass a header in this case with basic and then the base 64 auth, which you saw at the top. We also pass in 2 query parameters, and then we get back an access token, an ID token, and a refresh token. After we've got that, we then do a save user ID. So you might remember there's 2 business processes in this test. The first signs users up, and the second logs in as those users. This call saves those users so that we can randomly draw from these users to log in later in the other script in real time, but like it might be 1 second later or 5 minutes later. So what we do then is we effectively save that user ID. If I run this script now, you can see what it looks like. It runs pretty quick. There we go. It's called True Web here because that's the old version. So it's done. If I just scroll up, the main thing I wanted to show you was here, the ID token. You can see here ID token. Whenever you extract with the extractor, it logs it. So if I just take that, copy, and I go to jwt.io and paste in and get rid of that last quote, we can see that we've got a signature verified so that it's been signed correctly. I used the signature from the white paper on testdataservice.com.au website. And you can see in here all the claims are here for the appropriate person. Preston Matthews, emails verified. So this is really a mock OpenID Connect service, and you can see it works. So that's the first script. The second script in the test is the one that logs in with an existing user ID and then does a whole series of refresh token exchanges. So in this one, very similar to the previous script, but we don't grab a random person to start with. We grab a saved person. We get that saved identity, and then once we've got that identity, we push it in the same way as before. And so in this case, we push web response 1 extractors UID, and this is web response 1. These are the extractors, and this is UID. So that's how that works. Then we do the same thing with making sure that we've actually got a positive number. Then we do an authorize. We get back from the authorize an access token and a refresh token. We then do a token exchange. We pass in the authorization as a header and the token, the access token here, as code. And we get back an access token and a refresh token. We actually get an ID token as well, but I'm not extracting it. And then we go into a loop where a number between 1 and 9 times we go through this loop, which means it averages 5, 1 to 9 inclusive. And each time we do this, we actually get a refresh token. So the refresh token, what we do is we extract out the refresh token, and then we set a variable. This refresh token equals web response 5, which is this one, extract this refresh token, and it does it in a loop, and it works great. So if I push play on this one, we should see it go through. Waiting. There it goes. And it's done. So it doesn't take very long. It runs pretty fast, really. Okay, so that's that. Now, the actual test itself, we've got one scenario schedule, and we just ramp users up 5 users every second, which means that 1,000 users is ramped up in a bit over 3 minutes. And then we run for 17 minutes. As it says in the test plan, we do our statistical measuring of performance from the 5th minute to the end of the 20th minute, so 15 minutes. So it's stable by then. And runtime settings is the only other thing. When you have DevWeb scripts, you don't have much control in the settings. I've basically for this done as soon as the previous iteration ends. Normally we wouldn't do that, but I'm actually testing this to check for concurrency of 1,000, not to check for workload. So that's why I'm doing that. The only other thing I was going to show you is these load generators. So I use these 10 load generators, and where I get them from is I basically paste into, sorry, just grab this, it's hard to grab. I paste into the AWS PowerShell on the desktop. I just copy this here, which says required instances. I tell it a bunch of elastic IP references. I tell it I want C5x large, and the number of instances is required instances. I then wait for 30 seconds to give it a chance to start up. Then I go through and I do the appropriate Route 53 changes so that they've got the right domain name, and I can see them in the console easily. They've got their own number, and I use the set of IPs that I've got. Quite often, a lot of my tests, I have to use whitelisted IPs that the client says, okay, you can, I give them 20 IPs and I just use those 20. So in this case, I only needed 10, but I can use more than 10. So that's an artifact walkthrough of the script scenario and the things I use to set up the load generators. Hope this is interesting for you. And the next video is the test report after I've run the test. Thanks. Have a good day.